Measures underway to ban lab-grown meat in other states, including Alabama, Arizona, and Tennessee. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for May 7, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. It was a not safe for work day for jurors at work in Donald Trump's criminal trial Tuesday. Adult film actress Stormy Daniels took the stand and then took jurors on a journey to the alleged moment that she says became the thing that needed hushing up with the hush money payments. Was it all necessary? The judge didn't think so. We'll sort through it. The sitting president spoke on Holocaust Remembrance Day about what he called a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism in the United States, while in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the Hamas-approved peace deal with tanks. The 401st Brigade took control of the border of the key city of Rafah. On the southern border of the United States, our Camila Montoya Galvez reports from Mexico on migrant families who've bet their lives on finding a way to get into America. Plus, TikTok sues to stay in America in its current form, and we'll have a report on the states that allow teachers to carry weapons in schools. And Vladimir Putin inaugurated to a new term on Tuesday. Just how large are his ambitions? And finally, while the trip to the International Space Station has been delayed, there is still wonder in the vast, undiscovered country close at hand. Scientists are one step closer to understanding the phonetic alphabet sperm whales use to communicate. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with one trial underway and another on pause for former President Trump. Federal Judge Eileen Cannon has indefinitely postponed the Justice Department's classified documents case against Trump in Florida. It was originally scheduled to begin May 20th. This case, which was unlikely to begin before the presidential election this November, now seems even less so. Meanwhile, in New York, adult film actress Stormy Daniels testified in Trump's criminal case Tuesday about how she met the former president at a celebrity golf tournament in 2006. She also gave details, maybe too many details, about their alleged sexual encounter and the subsequent non-disclosure agreement she entered into afterward. The $130,000 payment to silence Daniels, paid by Trump's former attorney and fixer Michael Cohen, is at the center of the case. The former president has pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up the payment and has denied an encounter with Daniels. His attorneys asked the judge to declare a mistrial over Daniels' testimony. However, that request was quickly denied. Trump spoke briefly to the press after the court adjourned for the day.
This was a very big day, a very revealing day. As you see, their case is totally falling apart. They have nothing on books and records, and even something that should bear very little relationship to the case. It's just a disaster for the DA.
We are going to work on trying to figure out what happened in both the New York and Florida cases. Our Katrina Kaufman is standing by, but we begin with Scott McFarland. Scott, why did Cannon make this decision?
Judge Cannon is expressing some concerns about the complexity of this case, and she's saying there are all these legal challenges and issues she's got to sort out, some thorny legal issues, and they're intertwined with the distinctive classified records complications of a case that alleges a former president not only unlawfully retained but potentially exposed the nation's secrets. Put together, she says that May trial date is just not tenable. And what's more, John, she didn't set a new date. She didn't put a date later on the calendar to keep everybody on task or everybody on pace. This thing is now off the calendar, which raises the prospect this can take many, many months to get back on track. The idea that this trial happens before the election was always a tenuous one. Right. That idea seems to be far-fetched or farcical at this point.
Scott McFarland in Washington. Thank you very much, Scott. Now let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman, who was inside the courtroom Tuesday in Manhattan. Katrina, before we get to the action in Manhattan, any reaction to the Cannon case? As Scott said, this wasn't likely to make it before the election anyway.
I mean, I can't say that I'm surprised. I was at the hearing where we discussed the trial date in early March, and she has seemed to have no urgency when it comes to setting a date for this case. But, you know, it's been not a great few weeks for Jack Smith between the Supreme Court arguments on immunity and now this indefinite trial postponement in Florida.
And just to remind people, and then we'll move on quickly to New York, the reason, if it doesn't happen before the election and Donald Trump gets reelected, Justice Department cases go away. Correct,
yeah. He can't do anything about the state charges, but the federal charges, he could.
Now to the state charges in New York. Why is Stormy Daniels, everybody knows the name, but why is the testimony of Stormy Daniels important to the case?
So one could argue that perhaps the prosecution didn't need quite so much testimony from Stormy Daniels, but really she's related to two different aspects of the prosecution's case. One, we have the falsification of business records, which are really for Trump supposedly falsifying documents when he paid back Michael Cohen, but Michael Cohen's payment was to Stormy Daniels, supposedly to keep her silent in the days leading up before the 2016 election. And then in addition to that, the prosecution is also trying to prove this underlying second charge, which is that election fraud was committed. And part of that is the catch and kill scheme, which again is Stormy Daniels' story being suppressed by Donald Trump leading up to the election in order to help his candidacy. So with her testimony, they're really trying to present this story to the jury of who this woman is, how she first met Donald Trump, and what happened between them, as well as the history of their relationship.
Trump's defense lawyers called for a mistrial. What was that about?
So Stormy Daniels said a lot in court today. She shared a lot of details. She spoke very fast. During the first half of the day, the judge kept trying to curb that. He asked her to speak slower because also when the objections would come in, she was going so fast that basically by the time he sustained them, she had already answered the question. And she was just sharing so much color. But when they asked for the mistrial, he said, well, he did feel like too much detail was shared. It wasn't enough for a mistrial. And he also chastised the defense, and he said, why weren't you objecting more? At one point, the judge himself actually stopped her from saying something, and he pointed that out. He said, at one point, I sua sponte, it's called, objected to what she was saying because you weren't doing it. So he did say that there is some responsibility on them, and he offered to give a limiting instruction to the jury related to certain testimony, which the sides are still working out.
And then just super briefly, the cross-examination happened today. It'll happen again Thursday.
Yes.
What was the tenor of that?
That was extremely tense. I was in the courtroom. The tension was palpable. Susan Nicholas, who is one of Trump's defense attorneys, who does not often speak in court, but is known for being a top-notch defense lawyer, really went after Stormy Daniels. She was just showing a lot of what she called inconsistencies in her story, things that she had said on the stand, and then she was bringing out Stormy Daniels' book and showing passages that perhaps relayed the story slightly differently. So she's really doing everything she can to impeach her credibility, to show inconsistencies in what she's saying.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you again, as always.
Thank you.
The Biden administration has postponed the delivery of some ammunition to Israel in opposition to a major operation in Gaza's southern city of Rafah. Despite warnings from the president, the Israeli government says its forces are going into Rafah to eliminate Hamas. It is the first time since Israel started its military response to the October 7th attack that the White House has stopped a weapons shipment intended for Israel's military. The U.S. has repeatedly warned against a full-scale operation in the city where more than 1 million people are sheltering. The IDF says its ground forces seized control of the Gaza side of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, closing a crucial point of entry for aid into the territory. Meanwhile, in Israel, families of hostages held in Gaza are rallying against the government's rejection of a Hamas-proposed ceasefire deal. Remy Inocencio is following the story from Tel Aviv. Remy?
Good evening, John. We're now 7 months to the day since Hamas attacked southern Israel. And in this country, there is hope and there's desperation from the families of hostages still held in Gaza. We were at a protest outside the Defense Ministry this evening. Families and supporters were chanting the names of each of the 130 or so hostages. They want Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire proposal with Hamas. And this comes just one day after Hamas said it agreed to a proposal. They say they've agreed to a permanent ceasefire, a swap of hostages for Palestinians in Israeli jails, and for allowing all Gazans to return home across the Strip. But there are issues that do need to be worked out. An Israeli source tells CBS News that the proposal calls for an immediate ceasefire, that Hamas says it doesn't have 33 living hostages that Israel has asked for, and that Israel wants to be able to veto the release of some high-value prisoners who, they say at least, have blood on their hands. Now, all of these issues are very big challenges for Israel to overcome. Meanwhile, in southern Gaza, the IDF has taken over the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. Tanks have rolled across Gaza's southern side. The UN says that all aid deliveries have stopped, and now they have less than 1 day of fuel left. But one sliver of good news. The Pentagon now says it has finished construction of that floating pier to boost aid deliveries to Gaza. Weather permitting, John, it'll be connected to the Gaza shore in the near future.
Ramy Inocencio in Tel Aviv, thank you. Protests over the war in Gaza continue to rock college campuses across the U.S. and in Europe. At the University of Chicago, police cleared out an encampment that had been growing on its quad for more than a week. Tensions rose over the weekend between the pro-Palestinian supporters and counter-protesters after Israeli flags were hung near the encampment. Campus protests continued across the nation Monday night into Tuesday. At Rhode Island School of Design, demonstrators began occupying a campus administrative building. At MIT, police attempted to take a new encampment down, but protesters charged and tore down the barricade. And at Hunter College in New York, a large gathering of demonstrators marched less than a mile from the 2024 Met Gala. President Biden spoke at the Holocaust Memorial Museum's annual Days of Remembrance at the Capitol and warned of the growing threat of anti-Semitism. The president reminded Americans to continue teaching lessons about the 6 million Jews killed by Nazis during the Holocaust more than 8 decades ago, just as his parents taught him, and he has done with his own grandchildren. Biden also said the, quote, ancient hatred of Jews didn't begin with the Holocaust and didn't end with it either. He said that hatred was brought to life on October 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel and promised to protect Jewish Americans.
To the Jewish community, I want you to know, I see your fear, your hurt, and your pain. Let me reassure you, as your president, you're not alone. You belong. You always have and you always will. And my commitment to the safety of the Jewish people, the security of Israel, and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree.
In his speech, the president acknowledged while Americans have the right to protest on college campuses, engaging in acts of violence or anti-Semitism during these demonstrations is illegal. Authorities in Baltimore say they have recovered the body of the 6th and final victim of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. He's been identified as Jose Minor Lopez, seen in the 5th photo on your screen. The other 5 victims were recovered over the past month while officials worked on salvaging the wreckage. All 6 were construction workers filling potholes on the center span of the bridge before a cargo ship hit the bridge, causing it to collapse. A tornado watch was issued for the entire Chicago metro area Tuesday. This comes after twisters tore through parts of Oklahoma on Monday. At least 1 person is dead and several others are injured. One of the hardest hit areas was the city of Barnsdall, which was already recovering from a tornado that hit it last month. For more on the threats we're following, here's Alex Wilson from our partners at the Weather Channel.
Another active night of severe weather, and the threat continues into our Wednesday as well. We look at today, tonight, greatest risk of severe weather for parts of Indiana, Ohio, into Kentucky. Again, the risk there for damaging winds, for hail, and for tornadoes. Our Torcon values today are as high as a 5. That would indicate the likelihood for tornado watches and a few tornadoes possible. Some of those could be stronger, like what we saw yesterday. Through the evening and overnight, expect those storms through, again, Indiana, Ohio, down into Kentucky. Very heavy rain accompanying these as well. So that could lead to some flash flooding problems. You can see a very early start to the storminess in Nashville. Nashville, you guys up against severe weather throughout the day tomorrow as well. So it's not just morning, but later in the day as well. Lexington, St. Louis, down towards Texarkana. We keep those Torcon values at a 5 tomorrow. Parts of Missouri down into Tennessee. So timing this out, Again, the morning storms around Nashville. We'll continue to watch rounds of storms, big complexes with very heavy rain, gusty winds, and possible tornadoes. For more in-depth coverage, hope you'll watch the Weather Channel on cable and now live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Alex Wilson, thank you. They are trying to kill us. That's what some migrants are saying as they approach razor wire down to the border. Officers in Texas say it's a necessary deterrent. Our Camila Montoya Galvez traveled to both sides of the barrier as thousands wait in Mexico, hoping to one day enter the United States. Plus, Vladimir Putin could become Russia's longest-serving ruler. What are his ambitions as he starts his fourth term as president? We'll discuss later. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Mr. President, there's a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
Does this carrier strike group stand ready?
Just incredible to see there's an active search and rescue operation going on 12 hours after this accident.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
TikTok is suing the U.S. government over a law that would ban the app nationwide if its Chinese parent company won't sell it. President Biden signed the law last month as part of a $95 billion foreign aid package. Congress has expressed concerns about TikTok's ties to China as well as national security issues. But in its filing Tuesday, the company said lawmakers haven't offered evidence showing TikTok poses a risk large enough to justify the law. TikTok also said it's not commercially, technologically, or legally possible for its parent to divest in the 270 days the law requires. That means the app could shut down by January 19th of next year, pending any legal delays. 15 House Democrats are urging President Biden to take executive action on the U.S.-Mexico border. In a letter obtained by CBS News, legislators from 15 states said they want the president to restore order and, quote, fix our broken immigration system. Recent data shows the number of illegal border crossings have fallen, but tens of thousands are still trying to make it to the U.S. Camila Montoya Galvez traveled to the other side of the border in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, for a closer look at how the situation is unfolding there.
How long have you been waiting here? 9 days. How long? 5 days? 8 days?
Desperate and exhausted, dozens of migrants huddled under the shade, stranded in this makeshift camp in Mexico, with the U.S. just out of reach.
Where are you all from? ¿De dónde son? Colombia. Colombia? Nicaragua. Guatemala.
They came from across Latin America, fleeing poverty and political turmoil. But they had one common goal, getting to the U.S., no matter the cost.
¿Y tienen comida? Do you have food? No food. No money, no food, no water. How long are you willing to wait here for? ¿Cuánto tiempo esperan esperar aquí? As long as it takes.
René, a migrant from Honduras, had been there for 15 days, braving the elements with his young daughters.
¿Duermes aquí? You sleep here? Right there. You sleep right there. Con las niñas, with your daughters. ¿Y no te da miedo? You're not scared? You don't sleep the entire night. We just met this group of several dozen migrants here in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, including really small, young children. They're all waiting to get to the U.S., which is right there a few yards away, but this is in their way. Miles and miles of razor wire and other barriers set up by the state of Texas to repel them from crossing into the U.S. illegally.
These migrants showed us firsthand how sharp the wire was. They want to kill us, this man said. Local shelter director Karina Breceda believes the barriers are inhumane.
The U.S. is the greatest country in the world. We're able to have, I think, policy that treats this situation with dignity.
And you don't think this is the way to do it?
Not at all.
This should be a sign to them not to cross here.
On the U.S. side of the border, Texas trooper Elliot Torres understands why migrants want to cross, but says they should do so legally.
You say this deters people from crossing into the country illegally, but some would call this inhumane.
Right.
What do you think about that?
The inhumane part is in the optic, right? That's what people perceive it to be.
Could this wire cut the migrants if they're trying to get across?
Yes, sir. It could.
And that's part of the deterrence?
Yes, sir. Now, if anybody does get cut, that's when we step in again. We're not going to just let somebody stand there have an injury.
This year, illegal crossings along the U.S. border have plummeted since soaring to record levels in December. Texas officials say the dramatic drop stems from their aggressive operations. But Mexico has also overseen a massive crackdown on migrants. Tens of thousands of migrants are estimated to be waiting in Mexico for a chance to enter the U.S.
When we talk about the humanitarian crisis along the U.S.-Mexico border, we always focus on the side in the U.S. We rarely see images like this in Mexico.
Yeah,
Why is that?
I think this is a way of, out of sight, out of mind. You don't want to look at the poor. You don't want to look at people that are vulnerable because it makes us uncomfortable.
People like René and his daughters who are preparing to spend another night near the Texas barriers, hoping for a brighter future.
You think the sacrifice will ultimately be worth it? You think you will be able to get into the U.S. someday? ¿Crees que algún día vas a poder entrar a los Estados Unidos? Yes.
And Camilo joins me now. Camilo, it's great reporting.
Thanks, John.
For those who are the migrants you spoke with who are stuck there, sleeping outdoors, remind us again why they are there and they have hope, but what's next for them?
Right. The simple answer, John, is that they're growing increasingly desperate. The Biden administration, as you know, has set up this system to allow some migrants to enter the U.S. legally at official border crossings if they are able to secure an appointment through a smartphone app. But that process is capped at 1,500 spots per day, and the demand in Mexico, we found, is far higher. And so many of these migrants are waiting months, as many as 6 months, we heard, to get an appointment. And some of them are growing desperate and choosing to try to cross illegally into the U.S., as we saw these migrants try to do in the story. And what is in their way for those people who are trying to cross the border illegally are these layers of fencing and razor wire that Texas has put in place to prevent migrants from accessing Border Patrol agents, federal agents who can allow the migrants who request asylum. Texas, as you know, has no jurisdiction to process migrant
migrants under immigration laws, and so they cannot begin the asylum process with Texas officials.
And just quickly, are they using the app, trying to use the app, and it's just clogged, those you talk to?
Some of them are, and they're telling us that they grew desperate and that they gave up on trying because they woke up every morning at 9 a.m. local time to get an appointment, but the appointments go very quickly.
Very quickly. Tell me what Mexico's doing to crack down.
Well, Mexico has staged an aggressive and massive crackdown on migrants who are journeying north towards the U.S. Since the beginning of a new round of negotiations in December, when illegal crossings soared, Mexico has been stopping more U.S.-bound migrants from boarding trains and buses that would get them closer to American soil, and they're also deporting more migrants to southern Mexico.
Tell me quickly, Camilo, about the executive order. Where's that stand inside the Biden administration?
Well, sources familiar with the Biden administration's deliberations on immigration tell me that President Biden is indeed considering and weighing whether to invoke his executive authority to try to deter migrants from crossing the U.S. illegally. One proposal would involve him invoking an executive power known as 212F that allows presidents to suspend the entry of migrants and foreigners when it is determined that their arrival would be detrimental to U.S. interests, but that is still up in the air, we know. And of course, any executive order on immigration, as has been the case under Republican and Democratic administrations, would be challenged in federal court.
Go into the courts. Camilo, thank you as
Thanks,
always.
John.
Boeing's long-delayed crewed Starliner capsule launch was pushed back again. Monday's test flight was scrubbed 2 hours before liftoff to the International Space Station. In a blog post, NASA says there was a problem with the rocket's valve, which was not made by Boeing. The launch was supposed to be a crucial test for Boeing, which wants NASA's permission to conduct regular space flights. The mission will be delayed until at least Friday, so NASA can figure out if it needs to replace the valve. Do not adjust your television set or whatever device you are on. NASA released new video showing a simulation of what it's like to plunge into a black hole beyond the point of no return, also known as the event horizon. That's when a black hole's gravitational pull is so extreme, even light cannot escape it. If someone were to actually take this journey, they too would not escape. We know at least two things about sperm whales. First, they are very large. For reference, this wall behind me is 24 feet, nearly half of the 60-foot length the massive marine mammals can grow to. They also have the largest brain of any mammal. And we also know they are highly social creatures. They travel in pods, hunt together, have strong bonds with the other members of the pod, and scientists now are pretty sure they have fascinating conversations. But what are they saying? Scientists are closer to finding out. Researchers with the Cetacean Translation Initiative analyzed more than 8,700 snippets of sperm whale calls and clicks, which are made by squeezing air through the respiratory systems. And the group says sperm whales have 4 basic components of what the scientists are calling a phonetic alphabet. That they use those components in an unlimited number of combinations to communicate with fellow whales. Still to come, Stormy Daniels takes the stand. Legal analyst Ricky Kleeman joins us to discuss the significance of her testimony and what it means for the case against Donald Trump. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. Universities overseas are joining pro-Palestinian protests at U.S. colleges. In Amsterdam, demonstrators clashed with riot police, with officers using batons against those who tried to block roads around campus. Police detained 140 people Tuesday, but it's unclear how many were students. Tornadoes in the Midwest left a trail of destruction. Overnight, the National Weather Service received 17 reports of twisters. Officials say at least 1 person was killed. The tornado also hit Barnsdall, Oklahoma. It was the second twister to hit the town in 5 weeks. The adult film actress at the center of former President Trump's New York criminal trial took the stand Tuesday. Stormy Daniels described her alleged sexual encounter with Trump in 2006 and why she accepted a $130,000 hush money payment. Trump's defense asked for a mistrial over her testimony, which the judge denied. CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman joins me now. Ricky, take me into the mind of the prosecutors as they've been trying to build this case block by block. Which block is Stormy Daniels in the case?
Well, Stormy Daniels should have been in the block that had to do with the fact that, yes, she had a sexual encounter with Donald Trump, and many years later, she looked to sell her story, hired a lawyer named Keith Davidson, entered into an agreement, and accepted $130,000 through her lawyer from Michael Cohen. That's the block. Because the entire group of charges, 34 felony charges, having to do with alleged falsification of business records, all have to do with an alleged cover-up of this crime, if you want to call it a crime. Paying hush money is not a crime. Right. Committing infidelity is not a crime. But it's the idea that Donald Trump allegedly wanted her to be silent so that it would not affect his chances in the 2016 election.
I'm going to get to the defense's effort to impeach her as a witness, but let's stick on the prosecution for a moment. If you are a prosecutor and Stormy Daniels is on the stand and Donald Trump has said he never had any encounter with her, and yet Stormy Daniels can cite chapter and verse, if that's the way to describe it, does that go to impeaching his credibility for the jury, who has to weigh whether the things that Donald Trump has said or that his lawyer says on his behalf are true or not?
It may or may not, but if I were the prosecutor, I've always believed that you put in the bare bones because you do not want to give the defense the ability to have a lengthy and very effective cross-examination. in this, to use your phrase, by putting in chapter and verse, which has this tawdry, salacious kind of almost sickening over amount of detail, it allowed a great lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer named Susan Necklace, to go after Stormy Daniels hammer and tongs. And that's something the prosecution did not need, but they created.
So it creates this air of, well, the story doesn't quite add up, and that might bleed out into the whole case. Is that essentially the problem?
Yes, the defense is looking for one juror, just one juror. So if the defense says, I don't really need all this detail, and I certainly don't need the threatening story about this anonymous man who came up to Stormy Daniels, allegedly in a parking lot, who we cannot anywhere tie to Donald Trump. So some juror says, why did they have to go that far? I mean, that absolutely makes no sense. So if she's lying about that, does it mean that there's something that really doesn't seem right about the prosecutor's case?
Let me drive us all down to Florida. The judge there, Eileen Cannon, has indefinitely postponed the case. We don't know about a new date. One hasn't been set. Give me your sense. Donald Trump, delay has been one of his successful legal tactics in the past and in this case. So has he succeeded?
Well, he's succeeded. However, I know that Judge Cannon is getting a bad rap for this. There is no doubt that far and wide people are saying, well, of course she was going to do this. But
because she's a Trump appointee.
Yes, and because she has ruled in certain ways that are mysterious, to say the least. But nonetheless, when it comes to today, she has these really substantive motions that have to be decided. Plus, you've got to deal with the entire issue of how do you deal with classified records, getting them into the public domain that is before a jury. So the chances of this case ever going to trial before the November election were probably pretty slim to start.
Right. Documents so sensitive they can't be at trial, which is part of the allegation against Trump, that he kept documents that were so sensitive he shouldn't have them.
Exactly.
Ricky Kleeman, it's a pleasure as always. Thanks for being
John.
here. A court in Russia sentenced a U.S. citizen to 10 days in jail for breaking into a children's library while drunk. According to Russian media, the man was detained last week for petty hooliganism. Reports say he climbed through the library's window and fell asleep. He had been staying in the country on a tourist visa. Meanwhile, the mother of an American soldier also being held in Russia pleaded with the country not to hurt or torture him in an interview with CBS News. Staff Sergeant Gordon Black is accused of stealing from a woman. That's punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Black's mother said he was in Russia visiting his girlfriend. Ukraine says it foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky. Two colonels from Ukraine's state guard tasked with protecting officials were arrested for their alleged involvement in the scheme. Zelensky says there have been multiple attempts to assassinate him as the war with Russia stretches on. Reports of this recent attempt came the same day Vladimir Putin was inaugurated for a fifth term as president. Putin has served the entire 21st century. If he completes this 6-year term, he'll become the longest-serving Russian leader since Empress Catherine the Great in the 18th century. Let's bring in David Hershenhorn for more. He is international desk editor for the Washington Post, overseeing coverage of Russia's war in Ukraine. David is also the author of The Dissident, Alexei Navalny, Profile of a Political Prisoner. Thank you so much for being here with us. During the inauguration speech, Putin didn't offer any new policy. As someone who has extensively covered the region, has much changed since his inauguration ceremony all the way back in 2000?
Oh, quite a lot has changed. And, you know, this is not just the fifth presidential term for Putin, but it's really a quarter century as Russia's supreme political leader. Remember, he started as acting president after Boris Yeltsin resigned. He's been avoiding circumventing term limits since 2008, when he first came up against them, swapping jobs for one term with Dmitry Medvedev, who was then the prime minister. So this ceremony today, you saw, was really a way of highlighting his complete and total authority over Russia. The ceremony held in the Grand Kremlin Palace in a room where czars used to be crowned. To call it an inauguration is really a misnomer, because there was no chance that anybody other than Putin was going to win in what they called an election, but we know didn't meet basic democratic standards. No, go ahead.
Speaking of democratic standards, that makes me think about the population and the populace in Russia. What's your sense of the support for what he's been doing for 2 years in Ukraine and his sort of larger project?
Well, we've started publishing a series in the Washington Post this week, Russia Remastered, about just how huge a transformation is underway in Russia in parallel with the war in Ukraine. He is militarizing his society. He's always had a base of support, there's no question, but there's also no alternative. And now he's really programming a whole generation to treat the West as enemies, to view the United States as an enemy, repeating over and over again that Russia is at war with NATO. We know that's absolutely not the case. Russia crossed into Ukraine with tanks and missiles. So really a dramatic transformation underway since his last term. As you know, Navalny, his most formidable political opponent, is dead. Most of the Russian opposition now either exiled, imprisoned, or dead. Vladimir Kara-Murza just won a Pulitzer Prize, contributing opinion writer to the Washington Post, in jail 25 years for treason. All he wants is a democratic Russia. It's very difficult to gauge where Russians truly feel, because when we talk to them, they're afraid.
Yes, absolutely. David, give me a sense of Putin's larger ambitions. I was struck by a report that European intelligence officials say basically to their various countries, beware of attacks from Russia, that this isn't just an ideology. There is muscle behind this. Is that right?
There is no question Putin's mission is to make Russia great again. He's looking to restore the superpower status that Moscow enjoyed during the Soviet era. And this is part of the invasion of Ukraine. Will it stop with Ukraine? We know he invaded Georgia. We know there are troops in Moldova, in Transnistria. Putin has grander ambitions. This is why the West has reacted as strongly as it has, supporting Ukraine, hoping that the fight can be contained there. But there's no question that Putin has a vision of Russia as a renewed superpower. This is the series that we're writing about now in the Washington Post, a militarized, powerful country that can upend the U.S.-led global order, that will make its own rules, that will not be dictated to, where authoritarianism should be respected as a legitimate alternative to democracy. It's a very different kind of place than what folks had hoped for when the Soviet Union collapsed.
It is an extraordinary piece of work that you're doing in the Post, and I wonder if you, as a final question, can help educate viewers about the kinds of questions they should be thinking about in terms of U.S. policy with respect to Putin. We're in a presidential year. How should they think about what the president, whoever it may be, has to think about Putin and his ambitions?
Well, John, you're a political reporter, and this is also an American political story. This is about democracy and about freedom. It's a civilizational fight. Ukraine wants to be a normal, democratic country. Putin trying to stop that, trying to seize, this is part of his ambitions, 4 regions of Ukraine, in addition to Crimea, which he already invaded and annexed in 2014. So what Americans should understand and look to their leaders to respond to is a threat, real threat to democracy, including American democracy.
David Hershenhorn with the Washington Post. Thank you so much for coming on, David. For passionate columns written under great personal risk, the 2024 Pulitzer Prize for Commentary went to Washington Post contributor Vladimir Kara-Murza. The 42-year-old Russian politician and author was convicted of treason last year for criticizing the war in Ukraine. He delivered these remarks during the closing session of his trial in Moscow, which the Washington Post later published. The day will come when the darkness over our country will dissipate, when black will be called black and white will be called white, when at the official level it will be recognized that 2 times 2 is still 4, when a war will be called a war and a usurper, and when those who kindled and unleashed this war, rather than those who tried to stop it, will be recognized as criminals. Even today, even in the darkness surrounding us, even sitting in this cage, I love my country and believe in our people. I believe that we can walk this path. Kara-Murza is serving out a 25-year prison sentence in Siberia. His lawyers say he's being held in solitary confinement, but his message will live on, bolstered by his will to live. His most recent column is titled, "I am proud to have spoken out against Putin's crimes in Ukraine." As gun violence persists in American schools, some states are allowing school employees, even teachers, to carry weapons. We wanted to know whether this is improving safety. Hear what we found ahead. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. It's the clock. It's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting. It is clearly a pivotal moment. Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
In April, Tennessee passed a law allowing school employees to carry guns on school property. That's if they pass a background check and receive mental health clearance permits, 40 hours of training and written authorization. We wondered how many states allow this and how the policies work in practice. Tonight, some answers. At the start of the school year, 9 states allowed school employees to carry firearms on school grounds if approved by an authority, such as the school board or superintendent. 18 additional states allow people with permission from school authorities to carry firearms at K through 12 schools. Since the 2023 school year began, at least 6 states have updated laws on who can bring guns to schools. Rules on training, licensing, and which schools and employees qualify differ across the combined 30 states. CBS News reporter Haley Ott has been digging into these policies. Haley, it's good to have you here. What is the genesis, first of all, for these policies to have teachers instead of, security officials or cops?
So that was my first question. Why not have the police handle issues of security like this? So I reached out to a man named Joe Eaton, who helps run a training program for teachers across the country and school staff to teach them how to handle firearms in the case of a school shooting. And he said that the general idea is to try to address the amount of time between when a shooting might begin and when somebody who's armed can arrive on the scene and intervene. So here's what he said.
How long are you willing to wait for help to get there tells you how many dead or injured you're saying is acceptable in your schools. And the schools are saying, I want that number to be as small as possible. So first thing you've got to do is, number one, stop the killing as soon as possible. And that means having trained people there in the buildings at the point of violence to stop that killing as soon as possible. And then secondly, and just as important, you've got to stop the dying as soon as the killing is stopped.
So what he meant by stop the dying was also start doing first aid, which is included in these trainings. Now, there's a lot of talk about whether a training like this for civilians, for teachers, for staff would be enough to give them the tools they need to intervene in a situation like this. In Tennessee, for example, that's 40 hours that's required under this new law. There are critics, including some law enforcement officers, who say that that's just simply not enough to respond to a situation that's as complex as this. So I asked Joe, does this work? Yeah. And he said he thinks so, but actually there isn't really data to say either way.
So if we were asking about effectiveness, we don't know.
Right. So I said, wait, what? And called a bunch of people, academics, researchers, and they said the same thing. There just isn't the data to support a conclusion either way. One expert, Jacqueline Schildkraut, who researches gun violence at the Rockefeller Institute of Government, said that none of the shootings in K-12 schools that have occurred in this country have been stopped by an armed civilian, a teacher or a member of staff at school. She said there have been cases of people who have tackled a shooter or who have talked them down, but those are the cases that she could think of, civilians getting involved. Another researcher, Sonali Rajan at Columbia, said, not only do we not really have data to say whether this works either way, there also could be secondary unintended consequences that we also don't know about from instituting a policy like this. Both of them said that there were things that academics and researchers did know contributed to reducing instances of school shootings. Some of those include well-run tip lines and secure storage laws or practices so that some of these guns don't get into the hands of shooters in the first place.
Eliot, it's great stuff. Thank you. For only the sixth time in the last 40 years, we have a unanimous Rookie of the Year in the NBA. Up next, more on the Spurs star and what he was able to achieve in his first season as a pro. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Todd.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen.
She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
At the CBS Evening News, we focus on solutions, finding solutions to healthcare problems, how much money we can spend on the groceries, finding solutions to help people understand what are the right choices to make for you and your family.
When Ludwig van Beethoven died, a letter was found in which he wrote of crippling health issues. He asked that his doctor examine him after death to determine the cause. Scientists have a possible answer. DNA analysis of locks of hair taken from the composer when he died contained high concentrations of lead, mercury, and arsenic. High doses of lead overwhelms the nervous system. This may have destroyed Beethoven's hearing. The culprit may have been what he used to escape his troubles. Historians say Beethoven consumed excessive amounts of cheap wine, which was usually sweetened with lead in the 19th century. San Antonio Spurs center Victor Wembanyama is the NBA's Rookie of the Year. The Frenchman is only the 6th unanimous Rookie of the Year since 1984 and the first since 2016. Wembanyama averaged over 20 points and 10 rebounds per game. He is only the second rookie to lead the league in blocks, averaging 3.6 per game. Wemby made over 100 three-pointers this season, an anomaly for a big man, let alone someone that big at 7'4". Plus, he's only 20, and despite his age, Wembanyama could become the first rookie to be named to the All-Defensive team later this week. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Adult film actress Stormy Daniels testifies in Donald Trump's New York trial while his documents case in Florida is postponed indefinitely. We're following the latest in the former president's legal cases. Plus, Vladimir Putin's been inaugurated for a 5th term in Russia. We'll examine some of his ambitions and goals for the next 6 years. And we speak with families at the southern border who can't wait to get to the United States. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make
What
sense?
have you learned?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News original.